So great. So I'm Ollie Pendred. I'm from Community Energy South. We were set up in 2013, having mentored 12 groups around the south, around Sussex mainly, and as a representative group for the voice for the sector, but also to look at capacity building and new business models. So one of those is riding sunbeams. We're also working on rural heat projects and these webinars, obviously, and we link in a lot with Community Energy England. Very exciting this week to see the net zero strategy and a whole section about community energy and how it's expanding, and the government recognizing that, and that's a lot to do with the work of Community Energy England, which we link in with. So please do also take note of Community Energy England if that's news to you, and link in with them. So these are some of the groups across the southeast of England, you know, just a handpicked group. New groups, Sustainable Overton over in Hampshire, who are just about to launch their first share offer in Test Valley Community Energy, and the wonderful Ferry Farm down in Hampshire that has an annual community benefit fund of £60,000 from a solar farm, and Energise Sussex Coast in Hampshire, who have their own portfolio of renewable projects, but also are leaders in fuel poverty work. So there's just a few of those groups there. And Energy Alton, of course, have just launched a heat report, which is excellent. You can access on their website. So there's an awful lot going on. We have about 42 groups in the southeast of England now, and through this forum we can all share. We do a lot of work, partnerships with the DNOs, UK Power Networks, SSE, but also the county councils, making sure that community energy is embedded in regional energy strategies and net zero strategies for the local authorities. And in the southeast, we've got the Greater Southeast, the LEP, the energy strategy that community energy is very embedded in and has been for a few years. So that really supports the growth of the sector. And through our Pathways programme, as Liz mentioned, we do mentoring for new community energy groups. And we're currently doing that in Hampshire, Essex, and across South Wales National Park. And also we're involved with the last of the European projects, believe it or not, which go on until 2023, where we can support groups in Norfolk, Suffolk and Kent. So do get in touch if you're from those areas, and we can link you up with one of our mentoring team. So last of all, you know, obviously you're linked in with us, but we do have a monthly newsletter. We run these events, so do join up to the website and get involved. So thank you very much, Liz. I won't speak for any longer, and look forward to a really good event.
Thank you, Ollie. Right, well, I'm going to hand over now to AD Powell from Charge My Street. I'm really quite excited about these presentations. So AD, do I can't remember what the phrase is, but do take the floor.
Take the virtual floor, I think, exactly. is the phrase these days. Morning, everyone. Lovely to see you. It's quite intimidating, this screen, isn't it? So I'm from Charge My Street. I join you from a unusually sunny Lancaster, given it's actually been lashing it down for days. But it looks quite sunny there in the south as well. Just to give myself a little bit of southernness, I lived in Oxford for 30 years. So I'm particularly interested in Phil and his project, which we're going to be talking about. It's all about an Innovate project in Oxfordshire, so will be following me. Apologies if I cover things people have already seen before, but I wasn't quite sure of the audience. So some of it might be a bit basic, but I'm just trying to go through sort of a few basics of the EV charging maze that will help you to understand what you maybe could do as community energy groups. We, Charge My Street, I said, based in the Northwest, and have been installing across the Northwest, but increasingly so we're getting approaches from across the country. Just speaking to people in Essex yesterday about doing some stuff there, certainly in Dorset as well, down in Cornwall and in Oxfordshire as well. but part of the Innovate project we've been in is to sort of empower communities, so that's community energy groups, but also, you know, parish councils, groups like that. And that's, I think, where I'm sort of coming from for this particular presentation. Right, I shall just get up my screen. Hopefully it is there. Marvelous. Hope you can see that okay. So yes, I'm from Charge My Street, based in the Northwest. We're a community benefit society, and we install charge points in communities, so possibly areas that would not be first looked at by the commercial players. So if you're a community energy group, a parish council, a village hall, and you thought, you know, especially now we've seen a massive surge in inquiries, you know, what are your options for hosting your own charge point? And these are the three basic options. You can approach one of the commercial players in the market. You can install and manage yourself, or you can go for a community-based model. I mean, the second two are, you know, connected to a large extent. But before I go and explore those options, I think there needs to be a little refresher, in case you didn't, about, you know, EV charging and what it's all about. The question I get asked pretty much daily by people new to the scene is, how long does it take to charge a car? What it's crucial to remember that no matter what the advertised rate, if you come up to a charge point, if you're investigating these things, is the car determines the rate of charge in kilowatts. Okay. And then your other factor is the size of the car, you know, the size of the battery in the car, and that's measured in kilowatt hours. And you've got two types of charging. It's either AC, you know, AC as in you can just charge off your house, or, you know, an equivalent AC supply, or DC, rapid charging, which the ones you see there, those big ones you see. So the one on the left is somewhere on the M6, I think, which is dear to my heart, and the one on the right are the rapids that you see at Aldi. Also dear to my heart, as there's an Aldi across the road from where I live. But those are the rapid chargers. Those are the big expensive guys, and they charge at DC 50 watts or above. Charge My Street and other sort of, you know, if you were going to do it yourself, you pretty much guarantee you wouldn't be able to afford that, and your local network probably couldn't take it because it generally requires some reinforcement. So we're looking at these smaller sockets, and these are two that we have installed relatively recently. One is, they're both in the Lake District. One's at Kendal College, and the other one is in the centre of Langdale. So that's the sort of size of setups. It's very different. And these are AC chargers, and these our ones run up to 22 kilowatts. I'll come back to that in a second. People also ask, you know, am I going to be able to plug in? We've had a standardization of plugs across Europe now, and all new cars. And I consider ourselves still in Europe for the purposes of this description. So your type 2 charger is on the left, and that's what you do if you plug into an AC socket. And then your CCS is what you use to plug into a rapid, a DC, one of those big ones that you find at, you know, supermarkets and motorway service stations. As you can see, essentially the combined one is the type 2 with an extra bit on the bottom. Now, and the difference between the two is you carry your type 2 cable, the left-hand one, you carry that in your electric vehicle. It's provided with it. The CCS one is attached to the charger, so it's much like when you pull up to a traditional petrol pump. Back to this thing, the car determines the rate. So even if, say, for our chargers, the Charge My Street ones, we have a maximum rate of 22 kilowatts. If you're driving in, the second one from the left there is the very popular Nissan Leaf. The maximum rate you're going to get off AC, which is the top level, is 6.6 kilowatt. So even 22 is advertised, you're only going to get 6.6. That's the rate of charge you're going to get. At the moment, there are actually two, but the commonly seen one is the Renault Zoe on the right there, which charges at 22. If you're lucky enough to have a Porsche Taycan, they also charge at 22. But I'm not, suffice to say. And then the lower one there is if you pull up to a DC charger, then that's the maximum rate you're going to get for all those. You can see the Audi, it's a luxury vehicle, so you're going to get 11 kilowatts because its onboard inverter is that much better, and it can charge 120 kilowatts off a DC rapid. I must point out there are very few DC rapids that are above 100. The majority of DC chargers that you're going to find across the country are 50. They are being upgraded at the moment to 100. There are a couple of 150s, but they're few and far between. Just to put this in context, that if you're lucky enough to have a driveway, which many people don't, which is where Charge My Street sort of come into this, unless you're very unusual, UK housing stock only has a single phase AC supply to it. So you'll only ever be able to charge at 7. It's actually 7.4, but you're never going to be able to charge higher than that unless you have a 3-phase connection to your house, possibly if your house was an extra sort of commercial unit, but basically you're only going to get 7 at home. So another crucial thing to think about if you're thinking of installing in your village, in your locality, in your town, is dwell time. Now, I'm not going to go into this because there's a lot of numbers there, but basically dwell time is the sweet spot. And so, and I'm going to send these slides to Liz, and she'll distribute them after I've spoken, so you can have a look at this. But basically that bit that's circled, it's not circles, it's an ellipse, I know, but is the sweet spot. So, your dwell time versus your available charge rate. See, these are things you need to consider, So we install AC 22 because we're installing at sites where we think there'll be a dwell time of 4 hours or more. So, that works for us. And certainly overnight charging, which is the ethos of Charge My Street is to install in communities and have communities that don't have off-street parking, the residents to be within 5 minutes walk of one of our charge points. So it's the sort of equivalent of having your home charge point if you've not got a driveway. And if you've ever been to Lancaster, it is dominated by Victorian terraces and some very nice Victorian terraces, but nevertheless, everybody parks on the street. And at the moment, the county council is lagging slightly behind in providing on-street charging. So finding alternatives for those residents is crucial. So the other issues to consider, so who might actually use your charge point if you were to install one? Is it only going to be for visitors to your village hall? Are you going to make it private? To that? Is it going to be just completely public, or is it going to have mixed use? And then have you got room for it? Obviously you need parking and any other access restrictions. So if you're thinking about installing one in your community, obviously you need some electricity. So your two options: use the building supply, which is obviously the easier of the two, or get a new mains electricity connection. Now the second one can be very expensive and make it prohibitive in terms of doing it yourself or doing it as part of a community scheme. Depending on where you live, some regions are very cheap. Certainly Southern Power tends to be very, very cheap at giving you new connections. Up here in the Northwest, we're not so lucky. So ideally, building supply, and ideally you want a 3-phase one. Just easy graphic here. On the left-hand side, that's the sort of thing, it's a relatively recently installed distribution board. You've got 3 phases. The phases are L1, L2, L3. You've got 3 phases for free there that you can plug into. I can tell you there's not too much load on that building. And it also, you might be able to see it's got solar PV on the roof. That's the switch at the top. There's also the input from it there. The solar PV inverter input is on the bottom left of that. The right-hand side, clearly a little bit old. And quite frankly, if you plugged an EV charger into that, things are going to go pop at the very best. If you do have the right setup, then the extra bit, the bit you sort of don't see. So you've got the little sockets, I'll just say those sockets there that are on the outside of the building, but the bit you don't see is a sort of the switch gears, because you have a separate distribution board. You've got a couple of meters there for the chargers, your overall input meter bottom right. So that's the sort of size of things. You've also got just behind the cool box, and that's the hub. So you need smart charging. It needs to be able to talk to other chargers, talk to the cloud. That way you can do various clever things. As I said, you can either wall mount them or you end up on a pole, and then that switching gear is in that cabinet. So you need one of those cabinets if you can't put it inside. Regularly I get asked, so can we make money from hosting electric vehicle charge point. It's you need to play a long game. Let's be honest. We, and I'll come to this in a minute, we are have been very fortunate to have been funded by Innovate UK to explore if this can work from a ground up level, because the big companies have the backing to play the long game. Of course, we know that there's a ban on new petrol and diesel cars and vans from 2030 coming in. So, everybody is going to be charging in the medium to long term. But unless if you've got the backing to take you that long, you haven't. So at the moment, you're not going to make much because the install costs are so high. And that's the but we're coming to a tipping point where hopefully, and certainly from yesterday's announcement, which Ollie referred to, if there is intervention, whether it be at a local authority or a governmental level, into those high install costs, certainly the ones when you have to go to a new grid connection, then it will make more sense, and your payback, your break-even point as a community might be 5 years on your install capital cost versus 8 to 10 really at the moment. And maybe it's difficult to model exactly what the uptake in electric vehicles, and therefore electric vehicles and people who don't have home charging, because that's the crucial area we're looking at. COVID obviously scuppered a lot of travel, so we saw minimal charging. Since then, there's been a massive spike, and then since the fuel crisis a few weeks ago, the inquiries have been pretty much non-stop. So it's very difficult to predict. So I'll just run through these quickly. As I said, your three options are approach a large player. They tend to be dominant to fossil fuel companies and venture-backed businesses, so they can play the long game. They pay for everything as a general rule, but then at the same time, you're going to have to make a commercial case for them. And I've put closed networks to the bottom. That's aimed at just two of the providers. But there is a danger that you will be tied into having their network, and you won't have the ability to roam and do deals with other networks. You can do it yourself. There is an OZEV grant, which is available for community energy groups, well, for businesses, but also community energy groups and parish councils and the like, of £350 per socket. There's a link later on to the Energy Savings Trust to administer that grant, and also to the OZEV page that explains it. It's still going to put you looking at 800 quid for a 7 kilowatt dumb socket, around that, depending on many factors. But then you have to figure out how you're going to provide the electricity and how you're going to manage that, and you don't really want to provide it free. And so that's why you need the smart element. And then certainly all sockets, new sockets from the end of March, now have to have the smartness built into them. That is to say, they must be able to talk to the cloud. And we're looking at scheduling, so not when everybody, people come in, and you don't expect to plug in at 5 when there's a massive load on the grid. It'll be more a case of you want to be charged by the next morning. So electricity is cheaper during the night, so it would make more sense to have the electric vehicle charging overnight, between midnight and say 6. And then there's the community-based model, which we do. We've on now our third community share offer. The advantage of it's member-owned, not-for-profit. If you do it our way, there's no cost to you. You can do it your own way by doing the similar thing to what we're doing, and certainly part of our project we're doing for Innovate is to provide a toolkit, to provide those expertise, but in a package to groups across the country who want to do it themselves. And we're very happy to help out. I mean, that's part of our deliverable for Innovate. And one of the advantages of doing that as well, you administer yourself, and as long as you comply with some certain technical things, you can roam with other networks, which, everybody hates having different cards or different apps. I mean, any EV driver would tell you they've got multiple apps on their phone. At the moment, there's a consolidation going on where you should be able to use a large number of networks with the same app. That is in its early stages at the moment. So I said, we've been exploring this model through the Scaling On-Street Charging Infrastructure project, which is just coming to an end, which is it's funded by Innovate with Office for Zero Emission Vehicles money. I know Phil, who's going to be talking next, is also has also been part of an Innovate project, and that's the innovation. Can we drive it from community groups upwards? And we've had our successes here. This is West Point House, which is it's on Walney, which is the far west of Cumbria. Lovely place if you ever get to go there. You've got to go past the British Aero BAE Systems submarine building shipyard to get there, which is also in itself very interesting. But these people, and we've got the deputy mayor there, they've done exactly that, provided a charge points for the community, but also for their contractors' accommodation. If you'd like to know any more about Charge My Street, go to our website. As I said, we're concentrated in the Northwest, but we're getting inquiries from all over. And if you'd like to suggest a site that you think we could help with, or that you just like some advice on, click the suggest button, and then you'll see the different regions, and you can just give us some details and we'll get back to you. And these are some resources. These will be on the slides, links. The Energy Saving Trust, good round. Plug Life is a guy called Professor Ewan McTurk from is he from the Dundee University, I think, who has got some long explanatory films about all things EV, just the technical side, and certainly lithium mining, which keeps coming up. The link to the OZEV grants there that I talked about, and also the link to us at the bottom. And that is that for me.
Thank you, AD. That was really interesting and very full.
Yes, sorry about that.
No, I thought it was really good. We've got some questions that have come up in the chat box, but I think we will move on to Phil, who's going to, before we bring up the questions, who's going to give us some sort of more concrete examples of things that communities have done. Yeah, thank you very much. I've got loads of questions, so we'll move to Phil for now.
Hi everybody, thanks very much. Apologies, I'm just recovering from a bout of flu, so my voice is a bit croaky, so please bear with me. So following on from AD's presentation, as I mentioned, as AD mentioned, we were joint winners on some grant funding. The project I want to talk to you about now is Park and Charge Oxfordshire. So this is an Oxfordshire-based project, whereby we're focusing on putting our chargers into car parks. So we've identified 22 car parks around Oxfordshire in the 4 districts, and we'll be putting between 6 and 8 chargers, dual chargers, in each of these car parks. You can see the image there is the first car park in Cattle Market in Bicester. So as AD mentioned, one of the barriers for people that want to drive electric vehicles is actually 40% of people don't have access to home charging, so they cannot charge their cars at home. And this is kind of really why Park and Charge was born. It's all about identifying the best car parks in an area where people that live close by can use those car parks within a 5-10 minutes walk, leave their cars there overnight, and charge them up overnight. And equally, people using the car parks during the day can also get a charge during the day. So it's all about looking after local residents, choosing the right car parks, and giving people confidence that they can get to a charger that works, that's reliable, and people can enjoy a charging experience, which is very easy. Hence the name Easy Charge. So that's, if you like, our brief. That's how we started this project about 3 years ago. And in order to do that, we've actually developed our own charger. So the charger on the screen you can see at the moment, that's our charger. It's a dual 22 kilowatt charger, so it's an AC charger. It's a chunky piece of kit, and the reason it's so big is we've put a lot of control electronics in there to actually make sure this thing is reliable and will work for a long period. Because with these car parks, we're investing so much as Easy Charge into these car parks. Like AD mentioned, the installation costs are very, very significant. So we wanted a charger that was going to be ultra reliable, that was always on, that people could guarantee they could get a good charge from and have a good experience. Our chargers take payment by either through a contactless card, so you can just turn up with a debit card, or you can download the download the app, and you can actually pre-book a slot. So if you're coming to a car park in Henley and you want to guarantee a parking slot and guarantee a charging period, then you can actually pre-book via the app, and you can then turn up and take your charge and know that you've got a space and you're going to get a charge there. So what we've done is, as part of this project, is not only have we developed the charger and got funding to install all these chargers, so we'll be putting in 280 charge points in total throughout Oxfordshire, but we've actually had some fun with some events. So we've been engaging with the communities, we've been showing people how the chargers work, and also doing some test drives on electric vehicles. And just generally raising awareness for the communities, and it's been a lot of fun, a lot of positive feedback, and people really seem to enjoy the idea that these chargers will be coming shortly, and it will give them the freedom to and the confidence to charge and to run their own electric vehicles. One of the other things we do with our chargers is we offer a 24/7 helpline. So if anybody has any issues or any questions about charging their vehicles, there's a big helpline number on the chargers. So they can phone us anytime, day or night, and we can support them through that. We're very proud to have actually won an award already, although the chargers only went in June this year, but we've been awarded a Energy Pathfinder award from Oxfordshire Local Enterprise Partnership as one of the leading companies showing how we can actually make an impact and through the transition into electric vehicles. So we're very proud of that. So what we're doing all this to actually help people and enable people to make the shift from internal combustion engines over to electric vehicles. And the main outcome for this will be access to a reliable charging point locally in their community, in car parks. And I think one of the key things that people do like is that we're making these kind of charging hubs so that there's a lot of chargers there. So the Cattle Market, for example, has got six chargers, which is 12 charge points. So people are very confident when they get there that there's going to be space and they can get a charge. The other thing Oxfordshire has done, which is quite interesting, and it relates to one of the questions I think earlier on, is they've actually made it such that if people park a internal combustion engine vehicle in the charging bays, then they may get a fine. So it's quite important, I think, to have that. And the local authority has actually changed their car park orders to enable them to actually issue fines if people park in charging bays when they shouldn't be. And I think that's we're probably going to see that coming through more predominantly. Next slide is there's one of our open days where we had people with all sorts of vehicles turning up and charging, and we were answering questions for people about how they can park and charge and use the chargers. So that was really, really useful. Yeah, so that's more about the project. So the chargers on what we've got here, you see most of these chargers are tethered. So that means it's very easy just to turn up. You just lift your flap and plug the charge point in from a tethered lead. But we also, on one space in the car parks, we'll have socketed versions, so that if people have their own cables and want to use their own cables for charging, then they can attach to one of the chargers in the car parks through cables. The other thing we hope to do next year is, because we made it a very big chunky unit, and we've done that on purpose, it means that we've got the capability to upgrade the chargers in the future. So we'll be making these future-proof, and we hope to convert not all, but maybe some in each car park to DC chargers, 50 kilowatts in the future, which means that people can get a slightly faster charge if they're in a hurry. But like Adi says, a lot of our target market is for people that want to charge overnight. So that's a bit about us and our project. I've just got a little video that I'll play. Can you see that? I've just switched my screen. I hope you can see that.
I'm Phil Shadbolt. I'm the Managing Director of...
No, we can't see it.
We're working with Oxfordshire County Council.
Okay. Not sure how I can change that then.
Stop sharing your screen and then do another screen share.
Need to be in display mode.
Is that working?
Yep.
I'm Phil Shadbolt. I'm the Managing Director of Easy Charge. We're working with Oxfordshire County Council to deliver 140 chargers throughout Oxfordshire in around 20 car parks.
I think we've just had an overwhelmingly positive experience of working with Zeta. It's really pleasing to work with a local company. It's a really great story that they've seen what's not working with other chargers and want to build something right here that we then can see employed all across the county. So that's really satisfying. And it's a really collaborative spirit. So we do everything together. We talk a lot and feel like we can kind of overcome any issues really.
We're offering you an opportunity to join us on this journey of EV charging with growth that we're expecting over the next 10 years. We'll be giving you the opportunity to change the EV charging market, to offer local residents a better way of charging their vehicles. We are aiming to raise £1.2 million through the offer of a bond through FX. Join us and share in the profitability of this exciting new venture with Easy Charge and our 140 chargers that will be appearing all throughout Oxfordshire very, very soon.
So that's what we're aiming to do next. Is we've got a lot of funding through. We're very fortunate on this project. It's a £5.4 million project, so it's a very expensive project, and about 75% of that has been funded through Innovate UK and the Office for Zero Emission Vehicles. And like Adi said, some of the installations are really eye-wateringly expensive. When you have to upgrade the network to take all these chargers and put all that connectivity in, it can be very, very expensive. Fortunately, we found the funding that enables us to do this, and hopefully going forward, we'll actually be offering fully funded projects for similar local authorities, similar car parks, provided obviously we can show a return ultimately. And exactly like Adi said, this is a long play, which is why we sign up a 10-year contract, the minimum of a 10-year lease on these chargers to try and get a payback on them. So as you see there, I'll share in the chat box a minute the link to the investment page on FX, and we hope to do what we've done for Oxfordshire and roll that out all throughout the country in car parks up and down in local authorities, because we think this is what people want. Certainly from the ones we put in, we've got excellent feedback. People enjoy using the chargers, they trust them, and it's a very reasonable rate that we're charging for them. So no, it's very exciting and very good to be part of something that's not only important, I think, for electric vehicle drivers, but it's actually really important for the community as a whole and the country to achieve our net zero targets.
Thank you, Phil. Could I ask you to stop screen sharing now so I can?
Sure.
It just I will find that easy to manage things. Before we go on to hearing from Amelia, because she's going off in a slightly different direction that I think people will find really interesting, valuable, but it's a little bit more aimed at the individual rather than the community. So I think we should take some questions now about the community side of EV charging, and then we'll go on to Amelia from your Co-op Energy, if that's all right with everyone. There's a couple of really interesting questions that have come up from Ian Smith. Ian, if you want to unmute yourself, and also from Chris Rowland. But before we take a question from Ian, I think the thing that has really struck me about these two presentations is the first is the question about if it is of advantage for communities to engage in this sector, to engage financially in this sector. But certainly the other thing that really comes up to me, and I say this because we've got quite a few parish councillors attending, is it seems we really need to start planning for EV charging. I don't know, I'm not on parish or town council, so I don't know how much planning is involved, but certainly as communities, it looks like we could really do with some structural planning, you know, as part of local area plans or local area energy plans. And AD, you may want to comment on that. And then I invite Ian Smith to have his question, then Chris Rowland to put his 2 questions.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's loads of questions there. I mean, I imagine Phil will be better placed to talk about sort of town council planning and in terms of the car parking. I mean, there was the benefit, which was, I think it's Chris's question, of working with a community energy group. I think, I know I said that at small scale and basic community level, you're going to struggle to make a good business case just with the EV charge point alone. But if you have other sources of energy, then that's where it starts to make more sense. Certainly, PV solar is tricky because it doesn't provide a huge, unless you've got battery storage as part of the solar setup, it doesn't provide the rate of energy that you need for EV charge points. And as Phil said, you know, if you're looking at people charging overnight, that's not when the sun's shining. It might not be relevant to the community in the south to an extent, but certainly hydro is one of the best things if you want to connect in. And then that's when the business case begins to stack up, because rather than, you know, feeding back in with the pathetic feed-in tariff that, well, they're going, I understand they've gone up, you know, in the last 2 weeks quite significantly, but still the feed-in tariff is quite low. But then if you could, you know, sell to the charge point, that would be a benefit, another benefit apart from the carbon saving one. And then and we'll hand to Phil if that's okay, but yes, very much parking revenue. So I deal with the Lake District National Park almost on a daily basis. And of course, parking revenue from their car parks is a massively important a revenue stream. To a large extent, we have said most car parks, you still pay the parking charge, and then, you know, petrol ICE drivers, internal combustion engine drivers, pay their parking charge, and then they go elsewhere and pay for their fuel. All we're doing here is providing, you know, and Phil's doing is providing the convenience of doing the two at the same time. Phil, how have you dealt with that with Oxfordshire County Council?
Yes, so it depends which district. So some districts in Oxfordshire don't actually charge for parking at all. So in those, it's quite simple. But in Cherwell, for example, they do charge for parking, and exactly as you said, Adi, they still take a fee for parking there, and obviously you have to pay on top for charging your vehicle as well. In the future, I'm hoping to combine the two, because obviously we're taking a payment through the charge point, and it's actually quite easy for us transactionally to top that up and take a parking payment so that it's all done in one. That it sounds easy, and from a technical point of view, it's relatively easy, but actually arranging that with the local authorities is the difficult part. So we're working on that, and ultimately that's got to be the way to go, because nobody wants to pay for charging and then go somewhere else and pay for parking. It's not convenient, and that's what life's about these days, is making things convenient. So it'll come.
I mean, we found exactly the same. We can do it technically through our app, but
yeah,
integrating that with the local authority,
that's
finance, but generally you argue that you're not taking away spaces, you're enhancing them.
Absolutely.
And then and certainly, you know, as the percentage of electric vehicles on the road rises, and at the moment we're at the beginning of the steep curve bit, and certainly, you know, I'm in the northwest. I've got sort of Lancashire, which is very much, you know, it's not a tourism hotspot, let's be honest, but Cumbria is. So I've got both sides of the coin. There's people coming into town in Lancaster versus the people coming, you know, the visitors coming from far and wide to the national park. And so trying to balance the two, but you're enhancing the space, and then you're making the destination more attractive.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to hand over to Ian Smith, who had what looked like a good question. I can't remember what it is now. because I've been...
Liz, I think my question has been answered, actually, just about.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you, Ian. So Glenna from Battle, you have a question. And then we'll go to Hannah Scott from Thanet.
I was just wondering about in long-term car parks when people want to charge while they're at work and they're away from their car for 8, 10, 12 hours, whether or not you'd need some kind of attendant to swap the cars over to maximise use.
Well, I'm just going to jump in quickly. So if you have, for example, all the new cars seem to be 50 kilowatt hour batteries and above, and you're charging at 7 kilowatts, then you're talking about 7 hours dwell time if you are almost empty to getting up above 80%. So to an extent, that would not apply with your 7 kilowatt AC chargers. But I'm sure Phil's got a plan. But yeah, certainly we don't do DC rapids, so it's not an issue at the moment, and we would hope to nudge people through push notifications through the app if they are app users. So I'm getting distracted by that cat. And
I just had envisaged everybody on a Friday wanting to charge up while they're at work, ready for the weekend, and that could cause problems. And
yeah, Phil.
Yeah, well,
you can book at yours.
Yeah, you can book them, but from our utilisation at the moment, it's really random, actually, really random, which is quite encouraging. Yeah, like I said, you can book for people that want to park and stay there for the whole day. Obviously, we won't be fining people if they're fully charged and they're not taking a charge, but we will be reminding people with a text message or an email to say that thanks for parking here, but your car is now full. Please free up the space and allow somebody else to use the space. And I think that will become more important as more people use electric vehicles and more people use these charging spaces, and we'll have to monitor that and watch that. But we have got the right, the local authority has given us the right that if cars are continually parked and not taking a charge, then we do have the right to actually effectively put a penalty charge onto their charging rate.
yeah, I was just thinking in Oxford, you get on the bus at 7:30 in the morning and you might not get back until 7:30 at night, and it just seems such a waste of space.
Absolutely, yeah. We have got to monitor that carefully.
I think certainly if you're talking about the Oxford Park and Rides system, you'd need vast banks of chargers around the ring road. I mean, for us, it's tiny bit tricky. So in central Lancaster, similar parking nightmare to Oxford. And we have got a system that's been developed by another Innovate project where there's a sensor under the car. It's just a simple motion sensor. The car pulls in, and unless a charge session begins within a set period of time, I think it's set to 8 minutes, then a notification goes out. And if the appropriate parking orders are in place, then action can be taken. But then similarly at some of the Lake District car parks, you park your car and you're off up the fells, and 5-6 hours later, if you're on the top of one of the fells, you get a text message, which is unlikely in itself, but you get a text message saying your car's full. We're going, well, I'll abseil.
Thank you.
One of the questions there, Liz, was about the business model, and I don't think I mentioned anywhere in my presentation, but we do a profit share with Oxfordshire. So that's obviously negotiable depending on car parks and usage and location, but in order to give something back into the community, we are doing a profit share.
There's a couple from Chris there. They'll probably
and there's also a question from Dr. Hannah Scott.
Oh yeah.
So Hannah, do you want to put forward your question? And then we've got a question from Damien Toe.
I'll do Hannah's. Yeah.
The presentations. I was just wondering what we're kind of thinking about can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
What we're kind of thinking about sort of locally was looking at people that haven't got drive. So there's a lot of terrace houses, and so problem with people being able to buy electric cars because they won't be able to charge it. So we're sort of looking at some areas where perhaps we could put in charging points where people could park overnight and charge their cars up. And I was wondering whether that was the type of thing that the schemes that you've been doing, and if people are then sort of getting into a routine of just going to that car parking space and then leaving their car overnight each night, or do they sort of come every other night to charge their cars? So we were wondering sort of how that might work as the number of cars gets greater, how to kind of manage that people don't just sort of go there and use that space.
And consider it their space. Yeah, it's like their remote driveway. Yeah, it's not something we've encountered yet. And then you need to, it's in the context of a 50 kilowatt battery in a car is going to give you 200 plus miles of range. Certainly urban wise, on a good day, it's going to be longer than that. So that's quite a daily commute. So, you know, I had Zoe this time last year, and I was only, even though I was traveling up to the lakes quite often, I was only charging the maximum of twice a week, and generally it was just once overnight on a Sunday. So I think at the moment that's not going to be an issue, but once again, it's manageable through software. And, you know, as Phil just said, if somebody's not charging regularly but using the spot, then there are approaches you can take, gentle ones initially, and then if necessary, subsequently slightly more legal ones.
Okay, there's a question from Damien Toe, and then there's this question from Stefan, who works at Chandler's, Stefan at Chandler's Ford. Damien.
Hi, was that question about how to move people on?
Oh, okay.
I think we've had an answer from AD, but yeah, an observation, because we're doing a next generation project linking EV charging points and solar arrays to learn about the business case and what scenarios charge point contributes positively to the business for the PV. And we've noticed a couple of places where we've got charge points already, people are parking there for 10 hours and maybe charging for 2 hours. So yeah, I guess there's both technical ways of moving people on through push notifications, but also perhaps just the policy of the parking area. But if anybody's got any further thoughts beyond what AD said about the push notifications about moving people on, that would be interesting to hear. Because basically, you know, if you're only getting 2 hours of income for a charge point that could be occupied by other people, you're losing out on revenue and then pay back, and the whole business case is undermined.
Yeah. You need depending on how the car park's municipal, you need, TROs in place, and they take time and legal costs to change. You know, that would be up to who is administering the car parks. I assume the local authority. It's not something we've encountered that much yet. So, but it sounds like a similar concern to Hannah's about, they consider it their space, take an hour charge and park for 8.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
I liked your question about the tree though, Damien.
Wasn't mine. I think it was Tom's.
Oh, was that Tom's question? Oh, okay. Tom,
Okay.
I'll hand over to you. And then Stefan doesn't seem to be here. If you're here, Stefan, do unmute yourself, but I can't see you. So, yeah, let me hand over to Tom. And then there's a question from Susan Burton in Battle.
It's quite a simple question, really. I was thinking about in a residential street with on-street parking, putting charging points between 2 car parking spaces. Is there an opportunity to put a tree there as well? And what are the problems with putting a tree next to a charging point?
Oh, it's brilliant. I love it when you get a question you've not been asked before. It would be large. If you're on the street, it would depend to a large extent where the cabling is, I would imagine, because you obviously got to connect yourself to the mains. You can't, just on the side, you can't really do effective charging from lampposts unless. So you're looking to go into the main. So your main concern, your principal concern, would be your connection to the main supply in that street. But I can't. Yeah, and then disruption of, because if you're in the street, you connect to the main with your feeder pillar at one end of the two, then you'd be running a feeder supply to your sockets along the street. And I would say your main concern would be disruption of that feeder cable by root damage and expansion over time. But then that must be mitigated anyway to stop it lifting, paving, pushing the curb out and going under the tarmac. I don't really know enough about that, to be fair.
Okay, so Susan has a question and then Sylvia has a question.
Oh, yeah.
Well, thank you. My question is really about overlap and who leads the project of getting a community having community charge points and the potential for overlap. For example, in my area, we've got district and county who are both talking about charge points. So how did you ensure that your organisation was not overlapping with their work?
So Susan, from my perspective, what we did is we started our conversation with the county, and we're quite lucky in Oxfordshire. We've got quite a forward-thinking department within the county, actually called the iHub in Oxfordshire. They're very forward-thinking, and they were on top of this already. So what they did is they took the lead, if you like, for the county, and then they engaged individually with each district to work out how together we could offer the best solution and how to actually administer that and get the legal aspects all sorted out. So we actually engaged with both in Oxfordshire, and that's been very, very successful. They have actually worked very, very well together, I have to say. It's not been easy, but that's what we found in Oxfordshire is to actually try and work with both.
Yeah.
I've got to say that our experience has been somewhat different. I don't want to sound critical, but engaging with both the city council, for example, here in Lancaster, and then Lancashire County Council has been a little bit tricky. City council, much better. We can talk to them, and the way we've avoided it to an extent is because we've got good relationships with the other network providers. And they tend, if they tend to install for local authorities, because we just think we want the network to be better. It's all about, Phil was talking about confidence in the infrastructure. So confidence and not having black spots. There's nothing for EVs. So we have on several occasions where we've been planning something and then we've got wind of something happening next door, which is more advanced. Then, we backed out because, we would spend our shareholders' money in a community that had nothing rather than putting a second one in a community that was going to get one. But it is definitely a concern. We don't want to be tripping over each other. So
thank you.
Thank you, Adie. Sylvia, are you still here?
Yes, I'm still here. A brief one. We have a train station with a main line link to London, and with obviously lots of electricity because it's just been electrified. Is there any examples of combining with the network rail or whatever organisation it is to develop parking near the station to allow more commuters to use the train?
It's Bicester, isn't it, Phil?
Yeah. Well, I think that's absolutely. I think that's got to come. Obviously, the issue is who owns the car park, and there was a comment, I think, from John just there in the chat. It's vital to know who owns the car park. Obviously, if you're entering into a 10-year lease, you've got to know who the car park owner is and work with the car park owner. So, Chiltern Rail, for example, run the car park at the moment in Bicester. So we would be talking to them about what sort of charging requirements they have. But yeah, I'm sure there's going to be a requirement going forwards for charging in train station car parks. Absolutely.
Well, currently it's free, so everybody parks there, which is a bit silly.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Richard Stoke, you have a question.
Good morning, everybody. I live in a rural community. I'm a parish councillor in a rural community in Cornwall where we have no on-street parking and no off-street parking. And residents have to park in a sort of grass field, really, with a bit of matting on it, which is owned by the county council. And in other parts of our community, they can rent a parking space on a sort of bit of field from the Duchy of Cornwall. Now, my question is, I've been listening, and it's fantastic the work that you're doing, but nobody's talking about how on earth do we get EV charging into rural communities where I suspect the business case won't fly, because we're literally talking about the car parking for a dozen residents or maybe up to 20. I just wonder if there are any thoughts on that in the group.
I think that can,
and how I might address it as a parish councillor.
I think that can still stack up because, you know, in time, but I would, you know, you go small to start with, but you only need a few residents who make the conversion to EVs. The only problem is there's a lag between you putting your charge points in and then, you know, local residents buying EVs. So that is the problem to a large extent. We're not quite 50-50. We've done a lot of rural sites. If you look at Dent, sounds quite similar. There is no parking in Dent except for the parish council's field. So Dent is in the Yorkshire Dales, and we've installed there, you know, similar setup, some matting, and we've put a couple of charge points in down one wall. We were lucky that there was some power available. Yeah, it's once again, it's not going to make a lot of sense short term. It will long term, but I would say from parish council's point of view, OZEV, there'll be an OZEV application process, and certainly OZEV grants that can give you up to £15,000 for exactly that kind of rural installation. You will have to match fund 25% of that for each bit, but the OZEV link is on the slides that Liz will send out. But yeah,
is that the AUX scheme you're referring to?
Yeah, that's on street though, isn't it?
No, they've extended that now to cover. Yeah, what you need to have is need to have a good case for utilisation. So that's the challenge. If you go for AUX funding, that the Energy Saving Trust administer that funding, and we've used it very successfully in Oxfordshire. It's a relatively simple form to fill in, but you do have to justify why you've chosen that particular car park to apply for funding.
Sorry, just to qualify that, when you say why I've chosen that particular car park, is that why have I chosen that car park for that village in Cornwall? Or is it there is only one car park?
No, it's about proving to OZEV that there's a business case for using it. So they probably say, why that car park in that location? Is it because there's loads of residents that have got electric vehicle points? Will it be utilised? They're just basically asking, have you done your due diligence, or you just found a car park and you think it's a good idea to put a charger in? They're asking for a bit more substantial information to say, have you actually done some research? Have you identified that there's going to be usage and utilisation in that car park?
But if there's a ban on buying petrol vehicles, why do I need to research the fact that people are going to be driving electric cars? Sorry, I'm
just telling you what the form's going to ask you to fill in.
Yeah, that's a question. Yes, question for government for you.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that. It's been most helpful.
We've got a couple more questions, but I do feel that where we've got to segues us nicely into Amelia's presentation. So Amy, Tyler, Jones and Tamsin, I'm going to bring your questions in again after Amelia's presentation, if that's okay, because Amelia is going to talk to us about purchasing EVs.
Amazing, perfect. I will just share my screen quickly. Okay. Cool. Hopefully that's all come up all good.
Yeah.
But yeah, just want to say a quick thank you for inviting us to speak here. So great to be speaking amongst all of the amazing speakers we've heard already and to be involved in the conversation. So I guess a good place for me to start is to kind of explain who we are, why we're here, and how leasing an electric vehicle could play a part in transitioning to net zero. So I'm Amelia. I work as an Energy Innovation Coordinator at Your Co-op Energy. And as a bit of a background, Your Co-op Energy is owned by Octopus Energy. I'm sure you have heard of them before. They're the little, they're the supplier with the little pink octopus as their mascot. So we're partnered with them for a few different reasons. And one of those is obviously we can enjoy the freedom of being part of a larger supplier and utilize their customer service. But it also means that we can really leverage on our co-op difference, which is the power of communities. So naturally, being a cooperative means that we aim to make green, renewable energy accessible to everyone. We don't want it to just be limited to a few people. And we spotted a gap in accessibility and electric vehicles. So we've decided to take on this venture. And it's worth mentioning that this is our first step, and there's still so much more to do in making it more accessible. And we've got lots in the pipeline, so keep your eyes peeled on our space. So basically our aim is to help businesses and individuals live net zero and low carbon lifestyles through offering a trustworthy electric vehicle salary sacrifice scheme. And obviously Co-op's quite a trusted household name, so we thought it's only natural to want a trusted kind of supplier or trusted name to go to for your electric vehicle schemes. So essentially, the scheme is all about an employee leasing an electric vehicle through their salary. So each month, they can take a salary deduction to pay for the lease. And you may think, why would I go through my salary to do this and not a more general means? And the reason being is you can make lots and lots of savings. And I'll get onto that in a minute. So as I mentioned, we want to provide our members with a easily accessible, truly inclusive scheme. So when a business signs up to the scheme, their employees can get what's on the screen, which I'll run through quite quickly. So they'll get all fully electric cars sold in the UK market today, and this is because obviously we want it to be accessible, so have a range of cars for affordability, can get full comprehensive motor insurance and accident management services, servicing, maintenance and repairs, energy and road tax, tyres and roadside assistance. So we didn't want you to have to go to the ends of the earth to find all of these little bits for your package, but come here to get it really, really easily and all in one. But the thing in the pink box is kind of our difference. So this is our cooperative difference. So at the moment, we will be offering the charging solutions where relevant and available. So currently, if an EV order is placed this year, we will be providing a free home charger, which is obviously very good. And the main bit really, which is probably of most interest to you guys, is the opportunity to sign up to truly green energy that gives back to the community and complements the EV package. So you'll have the option, it's not necessarily, but you can have the option to sign up to our community power tariff. So that means that you could power your EV with community energy. And that's really great because you can give back to your community whilst driving electric, which is amazing. And we will be soon having a few EV tariffs available. However, obviously the current energy market is a little bit volatile. So this will take a little bit longer to get set in stone, but keep your eyes peeled again for this space. Amazing. So why would you lease an electric vehicle through salary sacrifice and not through a more general lease? Well, it's because of the amazing national insurance and income tax savings that you can have. So employees can make huge income tax savings of up to 45%, and benefit in kind tax is so low on electric vehicles, just 1% this tax year and 2% next, which is substantially lower than petrol cars. So to kind of gain a better real life perspective of all of this, we have a couple of real life case studies. Really important to note though, that this wouldn't be the same for everyone, and there's lots of impacting factors. So if you have any other salary sacrifices, so like cycle to work or your pension or where you live can also impact this. So don't take this as concrete, however, this is an example of how it can be used. So this is for Julia, and Julia is a 40-year-old engineer living in Milton Keynes. She's got a salary of £60,000 and has chosen a Tesla Model 3 for her electric vehicle. Her lease term is 36 months and her annual mileage is 10,000 miles. And this altogether means that her net monthly payment would be £420 a month. So it kind of gives you an idea of the pricing for this. This includes everything that I mentioned above, so obviously the insurance, accident management, but also leaver protection for unforeseen circumstances. So if, for example, she got ill and couldn't return back to work, then this would kind of cover that. And also a £500 end of contract damage waiver. So breaking down the numbers a little bit more, the gross monthly sacrifice would be £700. Net monthly sacrifice would be £420 and savings 280. So you've got the income tax savings, the national insurance savings, and the benefit in kind tax. So overall, her total savings are just over £10,000, which is very substantial over 3 years. And down here, you can see a little table of benefit in kind tax. You can see 1% for this tax year, and it goes up to 2%. And then obviously this impacts the sacrifice as you go up. So another case study, someone on a slightly lower salary than Julia is Max, and he's a 35-year-old HR manager living in Wiltshire. So he's got a £40,000 salary and has chosen the Renault Zoe as his vehicle. His term is also 36 months and also has an average mileage of 10,000 miles. And his net monthly sacrifice is £371 per month. And again, everything included, as I mentioned before. So this broken down a little bit further, his gross monthly sacrifice is £537, net monthly sacrifice of £371, and savings of 166. So income tax saving of 107, national insurance saving of 65, and benefit in kind of 6. So altogether, over 3 years, his total savings are £5,976. And again, you can see the impact of benefit in kind just here. So if you're an employee that would like your employer to integrate the scheme into their company, or an employer yourself, this is the implementation process that you'll go through. Now, I'm aware this might not be relevant for everybody, so I'll go through it quite quickly, and then I think we can come on to questions, which would be really great. So the initial stages is you'd go through a credit application and then complete and sign a few documents for Octopus, then go through the approval of these and look at the employee eligibility. Octopus system would then be set up and you'd get your key contact introductions, so payroll, approvals, invoicing and escalations, and then would come into a launch webinar rollout and marketing communications. So this is where we can help a business kind of cascade this and market it to their employees. And this would probably take about 2 to 4 weeks. But yeah, so that's kind of an overview. Wary that I skipped through it quite quickly. However, welcome any questions. And we've got Dali from our flexible benefits team that'll be happy to help answer them too. And if you are interested or would like to find out a little bit more, please email info@flexiblebenefits.coop or call the number on the screen. But yeah, that's it from us. Thank you so much for having us again.
Thank you, Amelia. If you could stop screen sharing, then I can see what's going on a bit better. So I don't know if anyone has any questions, and this wasn't meant as a, I didn't bring Amelia from Co-op, your Co-op, in to as a sales pitch, but really I just thought it would be interesting as we're trying to progress to EVs. And Mary Huntington has asked exactly the question that comes to me, and probably a lot of people who work in the community energy sector. What about self-employed people? So Amelia or Dali, either of you able to answer that?
Yeah, I'll take the question, that's absolutely fine. We get that asked quite often, to be honest with you. And really, essentially, you've got to be processing enough salary through PAYE to cover the salary sacrifice. And we do get a lot of people who are directors of companies who take dividends. And what we essentially say to them is that speak to your accountant, get them to do the comparison of keeping your profits and paying the corporation tax versus salary sacrificing a higher value of salary and making the tax and NI savings. And the reason why I can't give a more definite answer is because it varies in so many different people, and it really does vary on the salary that you award yourself. For that, we do get that asked on not just EV salary sacrifice schemes, but many others. But because EV is a higher value item, it does mean that you have to assign yourself a higher salary to be able to cover the costs of the lease. I hope that clarifies that question a little bit more, but essentially speak to your accountant and get them to do the two calculations.
Okay, so Matt Brown has made an observation about the sorts of people able to afford EVs at present, and which, yes, you're right, Matt. But Hannah Scott has another question, which I might as well ask for her. Unless, Hannah, do you want to speak?
It's fine. It was just a simple question about this is car leasing, not purchasing. And I think for the average person, this is quite a high, large amount from their salary if it's just leasing a car. And I don't really know much about car leasing. With all of this sort of investment every month, at the end, do you just lease another car? I just wondered a little bit more about that.
Yes, absolutely. And again, a super question, because people do see the costs being quite high. But some of the things that we remind our clients about is that whilst it's a lease, it does include your insurance, roadside assistance and maintenance and servicing. So you do get the complete package. And if you compare that to when you purchase a car, it's quite comparable to the depreciation of a new vehicle. So, and actually in some cases it's a lot cheaper. And because we're talking about electric cars here, the cost of fuel versus the cost of electricity gives a huge saving, huge saving. I mean, me for one, I fuel my car, and I am ordering an electric one, so I am advocating the services that we offer. But just at the moment, you know, you're looking at £70–80 to fuel your car, but to charge your car would be about £10. So you do see a lot of the savings in other areas too.
Also, we are looking more into this, and we're always trying to make it more accessible. So as I mentioned, this is the first step. So yeah, keep checking in with your Co-op Energy, because we'll be delving into some other ways to make it more accessible for everybody as well.
Thanks, Amelia. And thank you, AG, for your comments in the chat box. Do we have any more questions? Oh, everyone is surprisingly quiet, because if not, I'm going to go back to the questions earlier from Tamsin and Amy Tyler-Jones about financing rural projects. Tamsin, are you still here?
Hi, yes, yeah, definitely was just here really to look at EV chargers, really, and trying to get them in our villages. So we're going back to the rural funding question, and that old question about urban areas getting a lot of funding and things put in place for them, whereas the rural areas, we know that most people are car drivers. They have poor transport and actually very little option but to drive their car. So I had some requests on Facebook in the local community from people in our village in Cooksbridge near Lewis, East Sussex, about providing some chargers for them to use because they didn't have a driveway. And so I contacted Charge My Street, and somebody there had a very quick look at the demographics and said, most people have driveways, and so we won't consider you. And we have 160 homes in Cooksbridge. About 50 of those don't have driveways. So it's not far, just short of 30%, so just short of the 40% that Bill was talking about, being sort of nationally the number of people that without access to their own driveways or their own charging. So I just wondered, looking at that, was there some kind of profiling that took place to say their local authority housing, they won't be able to afford electric cars, or their ex-local authority housing? We've got a village hall with all renewable energy. It's got a great big wind turbine there. It seems like the perfect place to do it. We've got parking, and yet we're turned down. And actually every direction I go to, I seem to get very just disjointed responses, and no one really seems that interested in our village, despite screenshots of the Facebook requests from our residents asking for this.
Well, maybe Adi can cast some light.
Absolutely, because I knew, and I recognised Tamsin because I recognised the clock behind her as well. Yeah, so that was me that sent the email. I think I had a very, and I hold my hand up, I had a very quick look. I think the major problem we're talking about here is that we haven't come across, and I have said this to other people, why can't you just use somebody like Charge My Street in your area? And there don't appear to be many, if any, of us around. Charge My Street is a community benefit society. We're based in Lancaster. It has one full-time employee. You're looking at him. And that's the bottom line. It just have to think what's realistic. Can I run an install in Lewes? At the moment, not really.
So just say that then.
Well, no, because I apologise. I hold my hands up to that. I should have said, but yeah, we're swamped. If we, rural, definitely. If I would love to just go to every rural community like that, particularly 30% is perfect. Well, let's, why don't we do it?
Sounds like there's an opportunity there, Tamsin, to set up Charge My Street Cooksbridge.
Or Charge My Street South or something like that.
Charge My Street South or something like that.
Yeah, I appreciate it. At least you're on here, AZ. And to be honest, you're one of the people that I contacted because when we are researching online, it's very difficult to get answers. And actually, Charge My Street, we're very good at having the promotional videos on there and explaining how it worked and the funding of it, inviting funding as well to it. And you put yourselves out there very well. And I suppose you're a victim of your own success here and that you can't be everywhere at once. But it's, so it's not really criticism of you there. It's more just that age-old thing of being in a rural village. We just don't get the funding and the infrastructure here, and it's very frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to help. I'd love a team of people here that I could say, right, you do with that area of the south and let's get things in there. But obviously we need the funding. But it sounds like there's a commercial case there, but I apologize. I was being, too quick on things.
It just sounds
email
like swamped,
email me. Yeah,
so
email
I'm going
me.
to move on because Amy Tyler-Jones had a question from South Downs National Park. Amy, are you still here?
She is.
Hi, yes, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Hi, Liz. Yeah, I guess a question or a suggestion that communities might be able to use community infrastructure levy as part of the funding if they're looking for match funding for installing the EV chargers. So that's the tax that comes from development. I appreciate in rural areas there's not a lot of development, but where there is, they may be able to use that towards the cost. And if they've got a neighbourhood plan in place, then they'll capture more of that levy as well.
Thank you, Amy. Are there any other questions? I see that Mary Huntingdon has a question about an article she wants to write, which maybe Amelia, Phil and AD could each give, a 1 or 2 minute response to. Mary, do you want to comment?
Yes, I do our local community magazine, and we're trying to sort of encourage people to think, especially the elderly who are making short journeys, and electric cars would be ideal for them. So I'm going to do an article about things that people are doing locally. But I just thought, given the petrol prices, I've got a friend who's just bought an electric bike. And I mean, she said she's done 400 miles on it in those weeks where we couldn't get petrol sort of thing. And I just think that, plus the energy crisis, may make people think more about changing things in their lives. I just wondered if people have been aware of more people saying, oh yeah, perhaps it's time to do something on this.
Yeah, just I mean the volume of calls we're getting, I'm getting, it just indicate that there are people considering, but they want to know how to change. Certainly, if you're talking about the older people in your, I've mentioned somewhere else, social inclusion, but certainly with the decimation of rural bus services, so car clubs, certainly electric vehicle car clubs, very keen on. I've just seen someone. Tame, is that Oxfordshire Tame, John? Because certainly in our Innovate project, one of our partners that started off as a sort of a small partner is an electric vehicle car club in the northeast, and they have been, similarly to me, inundated with inquiries from across, because that, in terms of a way in, if you can't go into the salary sacrifice angle, a way in is setting up a car club. A certain Derwent Valley Car Club, who I'm talking about, they have, as well as their car club, they have designated drivers to get the elderly around, and they've been very successful, but at the same time struggling in many ways to make that business case.
Yeah.
But if you have a resident car club in a rural village, it does help the business case for getting the EV points in. So if you've got a tenant for one of the sockets, that helps the business case off the bat.
Well, interestingly, we've had, as part of the European grant, and Essex County Council is very go ahead on this, but they've put, I think it's £100 on top of St John's School, which is in the village. So some of the time that electricity is not going to be used by the school. So I'm thinking, could it be combined in some way with a car club or something like that? So.
Yeah. I mean, it's got to be joined up thinking. I mean, it's not, you certainly don't think about electric vehicle charge points in isolation. It's to do with, car clubs are to do with your local transport network. It's also to do with your renewables, how your renewables are delivered, how they're stored, and what you're making off them. I mean, are you getting local usage, or are you getting a poultry feed-in tariff? So it's the whole thing.
Thank you.
Thank you. It does seem like there's definitely a space somewhere. I mean, I just don't know enough about this, but as I said a bit earlier after your presentations, there is a space for actually planning for EVs and how EVs and the transition is going to happen in our local areas. It just seems, it feels a little haphazard at the moment. I'm not, maybe some local councillors can put me right on this, but it does feel like there's not much planning is going on. Richard, you'll have to tell me what you mean.
Yeah. Tom, Mary, sorry, there's a message for you in the chat from Tom, who works with me.
Thank you.
All right, cool.
Yeah, thanks. Saw that.
Right. Well, has anyone else got any other questions or anything else they would like to say? Because if not, we will end the call early once, which is quite unusual. It's all looking a bit silent. All right, well, in that case, thank you very much. Damien.
Damien here. Tamsin, I only half heard what you were talking about Cookbridge. We might be able to help Brighton Energy Co-op with a charge point, but do you have PV on your village hall or community centre at all?
Do we have EV on it?
PV, solar panels.
They do.
We have got a couple of solar panels, but they're for the hot water system. But we have wind turbines outside.
Oh, okay, interesting. I'll put my email address in the chat. Give me an email and I'll follow up.
Okay, thanks, Damien.
Okay, no problem.
Could I ask a question?
Please do.
I'm Sophie from Reading Hydro. We've just completed our hydro in Reading, and so we've got a customer for pretty much all electricity for the next 5 to 10 years, but they have got a car park. We're direct wired into them. So how long does it take to set it all up if you do end up thinking of going down the electric vehicle charging route?
So have you got a private wire?
Yeah.
Connection into from there to your main customer, yeah?
Yeah, we have, and then we're connected into the grid from them. So it's a bit like having solar panels on the roof of your house.
Well, then if you've got the capacity, the headroom for the customer needs the headroom, and then come off their distribution board. Are you going to private wire into their DB and then off into the grid after that? Yeah. So
and at the moment they're using all our electricity, so I'm thinking more for the long-term future if we have a more spread out view, or when in 20 years time we'll be producing more energy as well. We're limited by Ofgem at the moment.
I mean, possibly if you're looking at overnight charging would be the model to bring on, because the hydro is not going to turn off, is it? And so I imagine they're not using overnight.
Their pumps run all night. They're a very good customer because they use it even on Christmas Day. They're using the same electricity. So yeah, they're perfect customer for hydro.
But it would just make sense. It depends what if they're taking everything, there is no feed in, is there?
There is potentially occasionally, but we haven't been running long enough to find out when that is. It is most likely to be at night, but not for long.
Tricky. I mean, the argument would be, you know, if there's no spare capacity, then, but maybe if there's a midpoint between the saving the customer is making on what they're buying it off you versus what they were buying commercially, if there's a midpoint, then
or they maybe have to make more money if they put in charging points.
Yeah, and then you know, there's a balance there between then selling it on or selling it if there is any to be sold on. You know, difficult to say without it, but you know, there's got to be a space in there.
Right, great. And our other aim is that we might go into other forms of business as a community project within the town. And I'm interested in the EV charging side of things. So how long does it take, particularly people like Phil, sort of when you talk to the council to when you're actually setting it up in a car park? Is that, because with hydro it was 7 years for us, what's the sort of time span you're looking at?
So Sophie, with us, what we with some of the car parks, we actually had to get planning permission.
Right.
So that's dependent on your local district, but most now don't need planning permission. So if you take that out of the equation, what you have to do first is apply for a point of connection with your DNO, and that takes about 28 days for that to come through. You then need to work with your installation partner to work out what the program of works needs to be, do the design for the car park, have that approved by the local authority, and once that's approved and contracts are signed, then a typical car park installation with our subcontractor takes about 4 weeks.
So installing it takes 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So with all the kind of time lags in that, so is it about a year from inception to completion?
No. I think you should be able to do it. I would say between 3 and 6 months is a reasonable time period.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
It depends very much on the local authority and the signing of contracts.
Ours is pretty good. They've signed up to 2030 and stuff like that. So
yeah. Most local authorities are very good at the moment because they know they have to do something. So they know that this is a hot topic, something's got to happen. So they tend to move fairly quickly at the moment.
Okay, great. And in terms of, is it something where everybody involved is doing it for free, or do you get salaried people out of it?
So the funding that you get from OZEV, i.e. the AUX funding that we mentioned earlier, is only to pay for the charger and the installation costs. So it won't pay for legals, it won't pay for site investigations, it won't pay for health and safety or any of that kind of stuff. It's purely for the subcontractor costs for install and the supplier cost for the charge point.
Right. Presumably you can get RCEF funding. Can you?
Sorry, Liz?
Can you get RCEF funding for the feasibility and legals?
I've not heard of that one, sorry.
It's the Rural Community Energy Fund.
Yeah, I don't know.
Liz, could I come back just on you asked what I meant by absolutely. When you mentioned planning, my experience as a parish councillor is the parish council hasn't even got a clue that any of this falls within its remit.
Right.
And it's going to sit there and I assure you do absolutely nothing. And so when you talk about planning, I think it'd be really helpful, certainly I'm talking about myself now, or my community, if more information was available. Somebody, I think it was my friend in, where was it, Sussex, who was saying it was difficult to find out information.
Tamsin.
Yes, Tamsin. I used to come from Burgess Hill, by the way, so I know the area. But, you know, that sort of thing would be really, really helpful if we can raise the profile of this needs to be done in the community. I got into it because I was talking to Cornwall Council, who I think feel are doing similar things to EZ Charge. They're planning to put charge points in all the car parks that they own. They found it too difficult to go in with third parties, so they've kind of ditched that. But the community I live in, and unlike many small rural communities, 100 people live here. We're 7 miles from the nearest council car park. So we've got to do something locally, and I just think we need some help in raising the profile of it and not waiting till 2029 on December the 31st to say, oh dear, we've got to do something. Anyway.
Yeah, thank you. It sounds like at the moment it's kind of down to pioneers and advocates within local parishes, and you're feeling a little under-resourced in terms of information. So I might raise that with I can't remember what they're called, the National Association of oh God, what are they? Parish councils. So I will raise that with them. Thank you everybody who's leaving and saying thank you. There was a question from Megan Maltby, if she's still here. But maybe she's gone.
It was to do with getting a new connection, wasn't it? Or
Yeah,
it's just moved.
Thank you, Jan. Yeah, it was to do with the price of a new connection.
Well, it ranges. So in Wiltshire, we paid, I mean, just for the actual new connection, we paid just under £900 for exactly the same connection. In a different provider, different DNO provider in the Northwest, we pay about 3,000. And then you need all the equipment on top of that. You need all the switch gear on top of that. So that's the sort of range you're talking about, under 1,000 to 3 times as much.
Megan, have you any other questions you want to pop into the chat box? Just wait a second.
Yeah, just reinforcing what Adi said there about your point of connection costs. They vary so much. And you only know after you actually put an application in, what the cost will be. So it's very, very difficult. You can't predict it.
Okay, that's a nuisance, isn't it? Right. Well,
frustrating.
Thank you, everyone. I'm trying to keep an eye on the conversations and the chat box, and I think we've, it's now 25 to 12. So, and we've got. Thank you for everybody who's stayed on the call till way beyond our half past 11 time. And next month we're going to do something about fuel poverty and rental buildings. So do come along to that and share that with other people too. And I just want to thank our speakers for their time and their expertise. Feels to me like this is the first step in getting to understand all the issues involved in community energy and EV charging. It feels, for me, it feels like definitely a sort of first foray into it. So thank you very much.
Very welcome.